What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Behind the Facade. I'm your host, Gavin J. Gallagher, and on this podcast, I explore the mental and emotional game often playing out subconsciously both in your mind and the mind of everyone else in the real estate or property investment market. The key to success in this game is to master your mindset and behavior, to take control of your thoughts, your emotions, and, most importantly, your ego. Welcome to the show. What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode, and this week I am up at the crack of dawn to record this. Life has gotten very, very busy in the last while, and it's currently 5:09 in the morning, and this is the morning that this episode is going to go live. But we just roll with the punches, as they say. One of the things, I have a guest today, but before I speak about the guest, I want to first set the context, because what's got me so busy is the current state of the market. We are kind of at what Jones Lang LaSalle are referring to as a new market cycle. And what that usually means is that you're at the lowest point in the new market cycle and that it's going to start to rise from here. And I went to a conference that Jones Lang LaSalle held this past week. The conference was called Envision the View, and it was all about just their view of where the market is. And their Irish MD, John Moran, got up and spoke about it being a critical year, but he gave some context to the current state of the market. He said that the investment this past year, 2023, is down 70% on the previous year. So that just gives you some idea of the fall off in demand for investments. And this is all driven by interest rates and the uncertainty around interest rates. Now, he said that the decline in values was 15% across the year, across their entire kind of portfolio of different assets, asset classes and stuff. But he noted that office is down 20% on the year. And what he said as well was that the vacancy rate for offices is currently 14.9, which is the highest since 2013. And the reason I'm mentioning all this is because I'm bringing a guest on shortly, and he is Antony Slumbers. Now, Antony and I had a conversation about 3 years ago when this podcast was very new, and a lot of the things that Antony predicted have come to pass. So Antony was spot on, and what I wanted to do was bring back Antony and have a conversation about what's happening next. You know, where are we going with this current office market? What do people need to watch, and what are the opportunities ahead? Now, this Antony is very much now focused on artificial intelligence and how to use it in the real estate world. And so this is going to be an interesting conversation along those lines. And so if you want to listen to our earliest conversation, I think it goes back to, episode 16 or 17 or something like that. What I'll do is I'll put a link in the show notes so you can find it easily. But without further ado, my conversation with return guest Antony Slumbers. Antony Slumbers, welcome back to the podcast.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. I believe it's been 3.5 years, and last time we were in the midst of COVID. So
it's hard.
Long time ago, but
it is indeed, and it was actually episode 18, and now we're up in the episode 180 something.
Oh,
and
wow!
So 170 odd weeks ago since we last spoke, and I haven't missed a week since. So
I hope I didn't talk absolute BS, because you've got it on tape, as it were.
It's all there, and I'm going to put a link in the show notes for anyone who wants to listen to our first conversation. And I would actually recommend it to our listeners if they want to get a little bit of your backstory and things like that. But what's really interesting is, we had our conversation. It was literally a day or two after the birth of my son Dominic, and he's now 3.5, and so quite a lot has changed in those 3 years. And certainly the commercial office sector has changed a lot, because I'm in the middle, like it's literally pitched battles on the streets now to try to kind of get tenants and to try to get your bank funding over the line and things like that. It's really that the climate has changed so much in those 3 years. It's quite remarkable. And a lot of the predictions that you made that we talked about in the last episode have actually come to pass. And so it was very prescient, your views of the way the market is going to go. And so I'd love to get into a lot of that today. And one of the first things I'm going to suggest, though, is for those of we have a very international audience now with people all over the world. And so what I'm going to suggest is for those who haven't heard of Antony Slumbers, who is he and what does he do?
Okay, well, the too long did not read is I've been around for an awful long time. I actually started the first commercial real estate website in the UK in 1995, which is before a lot of prop tech people were even born. But there's actually something quite interesting about that. This is the most exciting time actually since then. But anyway, so that was the birth of the World Wide Web. In a nutshell, I essentially ran a web agency for about 10 years or so. We used to do websites for agents, pretty well always commercial agents. I've never done anything in Resi. It's always been commercial. So we were a web agency for a long time. And then I got involved into developing software. And for the following 10 years or so, I developed a lot of property management software, in particular productivity software with research websites and that sort of thing. But the main thing I did was a joint venture with British Land, who then were the largest real estate company in the UK, and I developed all these property management software tools with them, and they went into all their buildings and whatever. So in a nutshell, I spent about 10 years coding myself, and then another 5 years or so overseeing people. And then eventually I sort of had enough of that, and I'd started to write a lot more, and then I started to speak a lot more. And so really since about 2018, I probably spend about a third of my time doing advisory work with various established companies and startups, a third of it speaking, and a third of it doing other things. And of course, I almost forgot what I did. Actually, the other third is I spent a lot of time running online courses. So all the way during COVID, with a friend of mine, Draw Polek, who's based in New York, we ran the Future Proof real estate course. And then subsequently on my own, I've done the course on Space as a Service, which is sort of the thing I'm known for. If you go to my blog on antonslumbers.com, back to 2013, I've been going on about all this stuff. And I'm currently running a course on generative AI for real estate people.
Which is something we'll definitely get into today. Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, that covers quite a lot of ground there, Anthony, and I hope we have time to go through all of that. The first thing that I think we should start with, given where we left off in the previous conversation, is the last time we spoke, it was the end of August 2020, and we were 4 months into a global lockdown over the COVID pandemic. And as I mentioned, like a lot of those predictions that we talked about came to pass, and you predicted a huge fall in demand for offices, and you predicted that there'd be kind of a bifurcation of the market into two types of real estate. Commercial real estate would be split into the cheap and then the really high end that has all of the bells and whistles and the experience. And it would be kind of almost like a hotel where you'd have there would be people that would be working in real estate companies would have hospitality backgrounds and things like that. So, and we're starting to see that. And like most of my time at the moment is spent putting together events and communities and things like that for our business park, because we're trying to drive people back to the office, and they don't want to go in and spend time in a car driving into sort of clock in and clock out. They want some sort of experience when they get there. They want to have like something beyond just an office location to visit. And so very prescient. And I thought what would be a good initial discussion for us would be, like, in your view, like, what are the biggest lessons and takeaways now that we can look back on COVID and, as it's impacted on the commercial market has been, what would you say are the biggest sort of lessons and takeaways from COVID?
I always think there's a couple of things that we've all learned and we cannot unlearn. And the first of those is that, funnily enough, we don't actually need to be in the office to enable our companies to function. The reason I was so strong on this becoming a big thing is because, frankly, I'd run work like that for 20 odd years. Even when I had run my software companies, after I got past sort of coding all the stuff myself, all my coders were in India. So I was used to working like that. And, there was plenty of technology. And it was pretty clear that once people were forced to do something, all of a sudden they were forced to buy some decent broadband, buy a decent laptop, get on with it. And you sort of knew, well, yes, that's mostly going to work. There's always the caveat, it doesn't work for everyone and it doesn't work for everything, but mostly. So we mostly learned that we can function without an office if we like. And of course, the other thing we've learned, which is a follow-on from that, is that we don't have to commute 5 days a week. And that's absolutely the biggest function of all, that we've got to a point where we realize, well, we can do this or we can do that. What's the sensible thing to do? And then we're starting to compartmentalize things in the stuff I can do at home, the stuff I can do near home, there's stuff I can do only in the office, and there's stuff I might want to do in some third place. And we're all sort of triangulating what works for us.
I remember,
and it's just
in the last episode, you used the term home, hub, and roam. For this example.
Oh, I've forgotten that one. That's a goodie.
yeah.
That's a goodie. Hub home, and that's exactly what's happened, hasn't it? But the thing I am actually happy about is that I have always argued not against the office, but against bad offices. And I am very, very pro good offices operated in really good ways. And that is absolutely coming out in the wash. You look at, well, which offices are doing well, and they're pretty much, they're good, sustainable offices that have a form factor that suits modern way of working, are run properly, and are flexible and look after people's health and well-being, blah blah blah, and they are busy. And likewise, the flex offices, the good flex offices in London, they're 80% full. And so it's just absolutely coming true that people will go to places that enable them to do certain things that they need to do in those particular places. And a great deal of that is going to be about meeting people. There's all this sort of, well, we're social animals, therefore we need to go to the office. Yes, but no one's 5 days a week, 10 hours a day says sociable. But when we want to be sociable, we want to go somewhere nice. So I see all of this as, clearly it's a really bad market at the moment. But I'm pretty certain you can see who's going to come out the other end. And then when it comes out the other end, there's going to be a lot of offices that are going to generate more income than they've ever generated before. Because this thing about less but better. I don't need 20,000 square feet. I need 7,000 square feet, but it's going to be really good. And if that costs me what would have cost me 15,000 square feet, fine. I'll pay more for it. And that's going to be the game. The only thing I think, to be honest, that I actually got wrong was I always said the bottom end's going to be fine, and I'm less sure about that now. Because the bottom end, of course, is actually what competes with home. And seeing as home, if you look at all the Leesman data, home for a large percentage of people is better than the office, let alone the cheap stuff. But it also, where I think all of this is really interesting, though, is then we still have a need and a desire to go to cool places, nice places, interesting places. So at a sort of geo level, you can see the cities that are likely to do well are going to be those cities which are nice places to be. It's nice to be in the center of Dublin. It's nice to be in the center of London. It's great to be in Manhattan. It might not look at it, you look at the micro thing at the moment, doesn't look too good, but ultimately people are going to want to go where the really, really best places are. Which is going to leave definitely this big gap between, good and not so good. And what are we going to do with it? Probably the most interesting thing for real estate people, if they were coming into the industry now, would be thinking, what are we going to do with all this obsolete space? And what are we going to be doing with it over the next 10, 15 years? That's the super interesting area.
I think a lot of the obvious answer is residential, and that a lot of these office buildings. The only thing is there's so many complicating issues with it now, because we've got office buildings that have become vacant, and we're scratching our head. Do we make the investment in improving an office in a market where it's not very popular, and you might be putting bad money after good? And the next then would be, okay, do we convert to residential? But if you want to convert to residential, the floor plates and everything like that don't necessarily work. And then the other thing is, which if the floor plates don't work, then the next question is, do you demolish the building? And of course, if you propose to do that, then the environmentalists kind of get involved and say, hold on a sec, the embodied carbon is, you have to have a very good reason to be demolishing that building. And so it's become quite a complicated sort of equation to figure out. And we are genuinely kind of scratching our heads with a couple of issues like this. And we're kind of, it's really difficult. And the residential is the obvious thing, but the fact that the building doesn't necessarily suit it is the problem.
But residential doesn't. What's the stat? They reckon between 25% of office buildings are actually convertible into resi. I mean, we've probably got a smaller problem over here than the Americans have got, because their buildings are so huge and so deep. So unless you can push a great big hole down the middle, which no one can afford to do, you've got a problem. So it's very interesting to watch the retail sector as well, because we're going through, we're basically being hit with the same stick they hit retail 10, 15 years ago.
When Amazon...
I mean, it's interesting where I live. I live 30 miles outside of London, in a place called Guildford, and Guildford's got one of the best high streets in the country. But the high street is completely transforming now. It's lots of the closed shops have gone. It's full of coffee shops. It's full of basically food and beverage, hospitality. They're going to put in a big new hotel in there. They're going to build a lot more residential. So they're going to become, someone said to me I was in an event and someone said it's not the CBD anymore. It's now the Central Social District. And I love that, the Central Social District. Why are you going to town? Because I'm going into the Central Social District. So there's clearly real complications short term. But I think medium and long term, we're going to end up with a much more interesting built world. I mean, I hate to say it because I'm not sitting on loads of assets going up and down like a yo-yo. So I appreciate it's very easy for me to opine on these things, but there will come a point in a lot of places where prices really do dip. And then the whole thing will start again, and a great rebirth, and a whole new load of ideas will come out the other end. But what I would say again, why this is such an interesting period to be in the industry, is that the everything that worked really the last 20 years probably doesn't work now, and you can't just take a cookie cutter and go, oh, well, there we go. Boom. There's an office building. There's another one. There's another one. You now need to be creative and innovative, and you need vision. all of which is a real pain in the backside, but it does mean the market is going to become full of, frankly, a lot more interesting people and a lot more people who are creative and can think a bit differently and pay a lot more attention to their customer. You know, you look back on the commercial side for the last 20, 30 years, and the customer was the investor. No one really cared at all about who was in the building.
Yeah.
The thing was, can I produce this income at this yield for that institution? And you still need to do that. But if you pay attention to them first, they're going to lose out as well. You have to now pay attention to who's going to use the building.
Yeah,
and then they get their return because the building is so attractive. So it is a difficult one, because I do appreciate there's a lot of pain. There's a lot of pain out there. But real estate it's a cycle game, and it's a long game, and you know, it still comes fundamentally down. Do you own decent assets?
Yeah, in a good location.
In decent locations. Sooner or later, you'll be able to reconfigure them, and some good locations become bad locations, but not that many. You know, most good locations remain as good. Good locations. So yeah, I just said, you know, it's an interesting market, that's for sure.
For sure, and it's also, what's interesting is how it's being driven by the the banking side. There's very much this push towards ESG and sustainability, and the banks. It's funny, when anything that we're getting refinanced, there's a big focus on the not so much today, but some sort of a pathway to a highly sustainable portfolio at the end when it comes to refinancing, with the risk being that if you're not in that place, you won't refinance. You won't be capable of refinancing. And so there's a big push towards that I'm seeing at the moment. Are you I mean, you actually, in our last episode, we talked about sustainability and all that. What are you seeing in terms of the focus with real estate? We're seeing.
I find it a strange market at the moment, because there's a lot of talk about ESG, green mail, and who cares anymore, you know, down with ESG and all that. And, you know, we're not bothered. And, you know, I've sat in conversations with people going, oh, you know, it's all got all overhyped and we don't need to pay too much attention. I'm just thinking, you can talk all you like, but this is utterly delusional. Even today, the best occupiers want sustainable buildings. The regulators still want sustainable buildings. And the institutions, whatever they may say about, you know, don't go on about ESG all the time, they only want a sustainable building. So, and we are coming up to 2024, 2030, 6 years away. I spent most of this year giving a talk all around the world talking about the brick wall that is 2030. Yeah. And if you look at the regulations all around the world of what's coming into play in just now 6 years' time, it's a brick wall, and if you can hit it, it's really going to hurt. But I don't understand all this talk now going on about, oh, well, maybe ESG is not so important, because it fundamentally is. So just forget that. It's like all the talk of something that's driven me mad, probably from the moment after our conversation 3 years ago. People going on and on about, you know, hybrid work and should we go in the office and not in the office. The situation was set 3 years ago. We knew where we were going, and we were going to where we are now. You know, game over. Stop pretending it's 2019 or it's coming back. You know, just forget it. Lean into the future. Lean into sustainability. Lean into productivity. Lean into health and well-being, and above all else, lean into flexibility. Because you know what it's like. You follow a lot of the tech. I follow a lot of the tech. Just look at the last year. It's gone absolutely bonkers. And this is why I say it's the most exciting year I've known since 95, 96. something new was coming out every week. There were new things every week, and it was like, wow, can't believe that, can't believe that, can't believe that. And that went on for quite a long time, and then there was a crash, and then basically since 2001 to a couple of years ago, it's basically been pretty boring corporate, not that much exciting. I mean, people wasted 2 years prattling on about crypto and wasting all that time for a couple of years, but now you've suddenly got something, bang. And AI. People talk about GPT. Well, GPT is general purpose technology. This is like inventing the light bulb. It's like inventing electricity. The world is completely changing. So I have a pretty good idea where things will be in a year's time. Not bad in 2. As soon as you start getting to 5, let alone 10, I have no idea.
Yeah.
Who knows? In 10 years' time, we're going to have 100 times as much computing power as we have today. And today feels crazy. So, flexibility is going to become a super skill. Not just in our buildings. The buildings themselves need to be flexible. Floor plates need to be flexible. But then fit out. This all goes back to the Frank Duffy thing from years and years ago. Stage and then Shelland, where he talked about a building in shearing layers. Some last a long time, and other needs to be changed all the time. Certainly in commercial, all our assets are like stage sets at the moment.
Yeah. And
make them as flexible as that. It's going to be Oscar Wilde today, and then it's going to, Pinderello the next day. Who knows? But these are new skills, and there's still this fundamental thing going on that first we spend 90% of our time inside real estate, and that's not going to change. So it's not like the demand for real estate has gone, it's the demand for certain form factors, but it's still that. And then you look at the whole sustainability side, and either it's just going to go arse over and we're not going to get anywhere, or this is the most monster market one can possibly imagine. And new materials. One of the interesting things that popped up last week, DeepMind, Google's AI lab, released something last week where they've come up with, oh God, I can't remember the number, but an insane number of new materials that did not exist. Like graphene.
Yes,
graphene is a new material. They came up with some system, and it's come up with, I believe, tens of thousands of potential new materials. So there's so much incredibly interesting stuff in terms of the physical world, and then you've got the whole thing of you've got to understand the physical world, and you've got to understand people. And I like that. And personally for me, the whole prop tech world for a long time spent so much time just basically doing fintech. All the prop tech stuff. You get your mortgage here or get your insurance. And it's just fintech. There's not that much about real estate.
Yeah.
And I happen to love real estate. I love a great building, and I love people who build great buildings. So this is a time for you've got to build great buildings.
It's true, and if you think about the investment at the moment, everything is going into AI. I mean, the level of investment from Google, from Microsoft, OpenAI, all of these guys, and you see that, and you realize the size. Like, whilst other, the social media companies might have laid off tens of thousands of people, I think most of them will be getting hired. Well, obviously they need to have the right skill sets, but I'm sure that the AI side of the businesses are hiring just as many people has been let go by the social media companies. I mean, the 10,000 that were laid off from Facebook or whatever, in the last 2 or 3 years, I'm sure there's 50,000 people have been hired by Microsoft, Google, all of this kind of stuff. And it is interesting when you think about that, can you position yourself? The thing is they're growing so fast that, like you say, flexibility is the thing that they're going to need, because signing a 10 or 15 year lease, even that sounds short to the old folks that got into real estate back when 25 and 35-year leases were the norm. For 10 years, are you crazy? I mean, why would we sign something as long as that? And so we're all having to kind of re-educate ourselves as to what is a long-term lease nowadays.
But it's also what actually constitutes value as well. So, you think Facebook signed a 20-year lease with British Land on a big building in the centre of London. They spent 2.5 years fitting it out and redoing it, and then they never moved in.
And then they paid how many years up front to get out?
160 million pounds to get out. They paid 12 years, and they never went there. And so, is a single building with one tenant better than a single building with 10 tenants? I think good buildings are going to attract good companies. Yeah. And there's such a synergy between the types of companies that are, for instance, who already were leaning into technology and are now leaning into AI and stuff. They're becoming stronger and stronger users of the same sort of spaces that are leaning into the future as well. So that type of company needs that type of space, and that's what they're going to attract. So again, the market becomes very, very bifurcated, but you really need to target. You need to target the companies of the future, because they are definitely going to take a lot less space than before. They are definitely going to operate in flexible ways, but they are also definitely going to need spaces. There's a lot of stuff that you can do in a building that's nicely. I mean, even me here, I'm very, very lucky. I've got a big office at the end of my garden. So I've got everything I want here. It's all nicely set up, big telly. I've got a shower, I've got a cooker, I've got sofas, I've got everything. So all my stuff is set up here. If I didn't have this and I had an office where I could set nothing up, I'd need it. I'd need it somewhere. I'd need somewhere. I don't need a lot. I don't create much paper at the moment. But I want to know. I want my desk. I want my big monitor. I want my lights and that sort of stuff. It's going to have to happen somewhere. And you still need to meet people. In fact, you need to meet people more now. One of the things I said years ago, and I think it's really becoming true now. The biggest surprise of generative AI over the last year has been that, if you like, us knowledge workers, we thought we were safe. We thought, we're designers, we're creative. They can't do that. Factory workers moving to India. Capitalism. But they're coming for us now. They can. It turns out that these machines can be creative, and they can be innovative. So it's becoming clearer and clearer that the skills of a human and the skills of machines are coming closer together, but there is still fundamentally, they think differently. And so human plus machine is by and large going to win. There was a really interesting study done by Harvard, MIT, Wharton, and the Boston Consulting Group. And it's probably the biggest exercise in trialing the effectiveness of Gen AI amongst knowledge workers has been done. 750 Boston Consulting Group consultants. So this is pretty high-end stuff. But in a nutshell, one of the things they found was that with creative tasks, so they basically split things up into a creative task and a much more business reasoning task. In a nutshell, the business reasoning task was less good using the technology, but for the creative side, everyone was much better. Your average and below was about 40% more productive. Even your top people were like 17% more productive on the creative side. But what they found was that at an individual level, you're more creative, but actually people using the technology tend to be more creative in the same way.
Right.
So you're creating more stuff, which is good, but it turns out it's all within a certain aesthetic or style or whatever. And what's created with the technology is actually different to the control group who weren't using any technology at all.
Right.
So if we want to get the most creative things, you need people who are being creative using the tools, and then you need people who are being creative not using the tools, and then you move the Venn diagram together. And that's a really interesting thing, but it's because still fundamentally, we're biological. Blah, blah, blah. We're biological. Machines are
Yes.
dumb. Machines, they look like they think like us, but they don't think like us, and we're different. So this need to understand as a human what you can do with these tools is becoming stronger and stronger. And it's also, well, what can I do with these tools if I add Gavin into the equation and I ask, Jemima in, and et cetera, et cetera. And that's what people are going to use these spaces for. Very, very deliberative, group focused work.
Yeah.
And that again becomes really interesting, because you've then got a group of people trying to do stuff which, if you like, is at a higher level than we're used to. What types of space do you put them in? You can't just put them in a big boring grey office with lots of grey chairs and desks. That's not going to work. You've got to put them in environments that really enhance and catalyze their human skills. So it's fascinating watching all the generative stuff, because it's getting closer, but there's some things that you think, oh well, that would be really easy for the machine, but it's actually incredibly hard. And then there's some things that you think would be really, really hard, and they're incredibly easy. And we're sort of feeling our way through this. But sorry, I'm going on a bit. But there was one big point that I wanted to make to everyone who's listening to this, having sort of immersed myself in this for months and months and months now. The biggest winners from generative AI in the short term are you and me, are individuals, because this is suddenly a technology where, go back a year and a bit, Joe Public could not use AI. There's no way. I mean, you could have AI use me. Google have been using it for filtering search for years, but we couldn't use it. Now all we have is a text box. So all of us can do things with that text box, which once you start playing with these things and you realize how hard you can push that text box, it's really amazing. At a corporate level, for lots of reasons, it's going to be harder integrating this technology into a corporate level. It will come, but it's still going to be harder. But at an individual level, so in terms of how do I future-proof moi? Really got to dive into this stuff, because there is potentially such huge individual productivity gains. And as I say, at an individual level, there's going to be a big gap. Go forward 5 years and everyone will do it. I don't know, certainly for the next year, there's going to be a big gap between people who use this stuff and don't use it. If I could use one example, I was at a small conference last week, and there was a panel on there, and it was a pretty good panel actually. It was sort of four smart people, and normally you listen to panels, but then your mind wanders and you have to bring yourself back. Well, I just recorded it just on my phone, and then when I got home, I put it into a program called Descript, which then gave me a transcript. And with the transcript, I put that in ChatGPT and said, "Can you just give me an extended breakdown of all the main points in this thing?" And then, boom, 1 page, and that's just incredibly useful in so many different ways. But sorry, I'm reminding you that you wind me up and I just keep going. I'm a Duracell bunny.
It's great. No, it's great. We're getting a lesson in AI, and I mean, that's what I wanted to ask you about your course that you've started on generative AI for real estate. I mean, I use AI, I use ChatGPT. I was sort of immediately immersed into it, and I love using it. But it does have limitations. I mean, if you ask it to write a blog for you, it's going to be pretty kind of out of the box. It's fairly standard, I find. What I love about it is to format it, or to kind of create like headings, and then I might populate that myself using my own kind of insights and things like that. In terms of the real estate world, how are you? I mean, talk about your course and the curriculum, and how you're sort of that real estate people should be looking at this.
Well, it's interesting. The course itself is split into, I think it's about 15 different modules. So there's like 15 different presentations. And then we have 3 live 2-hour sessions. Mostly, I don't go through all the content with the group because it would just take too long. So I do lots of stuff on where's this come from? What is it? What can you do with it? What are the ethical considerations? How do you integrate it into a company? How do you prepare your company for it? What skills do I need, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of stuff for people to just sit down quietly and go through. What are the implications of this, that, and the other? But they're mainly during the course. I concentrate on case studies. We have about 12 different case studies at the moment of people doing really interesting things. And then I actually concentrate on use cases and then these things in action. So I do quite a bit about legal generic use cases. So the point about a lot of this stuff, yes, there's lots of real estate applications, but there's a lot of just generic stuff for processing, for business, stuff we do. And it doesn't matter whether we're in the real estate industry or X other industry, we're still doing all this stuff. So there's lots of generic use cases. And then there's quite a lot of legal use cases, which overlap because we deal with lawyers a lot in the real estate industry. And also, analyzing contracts and understanding this, that, and the other. And then I do a lot on real estate use cases. Now, the interesting thing with the real estate use cases is that there's a great deal you can do out of the box at the moment by just sitting down. Someone gives you a good guide to how to prompt well. And one of the sessions I go through, I think 12 different ways of prompting, which make a difference. You've got to
prompt engineering.
You've got to give context, clarity, and constraint. You need to use those. But then a lot of the real estate use cases are quite nascent at the moment. There's a lot that's coming, and I have a presentation which split into 14 different categories, and it has a big header that says when productized. Now, so there's a lot of things that as an individual, you and I might be able to just sit and poke and prod our way through and answer a lot of this stuff. But that doesn't really work at a corporate level. Yeah. Someone's got to productize it, wrap it up nicely, and stick it on the corporate desktop. So there's a lot of that's going to happen over the next few years. But it's just interesting, this little conference last week. There was someone from Yardi there, been around for ages and whatever, and they're starting to plug language models into their stuff quite a lot. So they've just developed a really nice little chatbot for residential inquiries, external inquiries. I need an apartment, and then people internally. And the stats were amazing. It's something like they were having 40% more applications outside of office hours that then progress to leads, because this thing you can just have a chat with it and you can ask it more information, and so you can do a lot of the qualifying, just the pre-qualifying, before you need to put a human in the loop. And most of the time you need to stick a human in the loop somewhere in these systems. but it depends where. And with a lot of these things, once you start breaking real estate operations down, there's quite a lot where we could deal with that, add human, and then that. So I think in the short term, what I encourage people to do is frankly just to use the hell out of these tools for a while, just themselves. Just keep playing, push harder, and then when you've pushed harder, push a bit harder, and see where you can take things. And at a corporate level, I would say within a company, you want more people using these tools as many people using these tools as you possibly can. Yes, you have to have a bit more control over it than little old me sitting here. I'm not worried about who sees what. But you want a lot of people using things, and every company should be starting to think all the way through the levels of the company, for the people who understand the nuances of their level of the company, which bits can we chop out? How can we make their life easier? Because you know what it's like. If you listen to the stats about the satisfaction level of people in the office and how many people enjoy their jobs, it's pitiful. Yeah. It's absolutely pitiful. I think there was an American one last week that said 27% of people, were happy in their jobs. And you think, this is terrible. This is really terrible. But a lot of that, apart from the politics side, which is another one of the reasons they don't want to go back in the office, because companies with bad politics keep you out of that. But a lot of people have to do loads of stuff which is just boring. And a lot of this stuff can get rid of being boring. Now, there's always you'll always get the smart aleck who come up and go, oh yes, that's all very well, but you just want us all to be redundant, don't you? You want us all to be unemployed. It doesn't work like that, and never has worked like that. But B, with it at just the corporate level and the individual level, the company that leans in and has all its employees lean into this technology is going to have a big edge over the one that doesn't.
To be massively more productive, yeah.
Exactly. And you know what it's like. We're not talking, oh, you're just a little bit quicker here. You're massively more productive on a lot of things that you have done before, but you're also doing lots of things that you'd never have done before. Yeah. Who's ever thought of, who gets in loads of research reports and summarizes them and just reads the summary? Nobody does, but they do now.
Yeah.
So the opportunity to upskill your company, you, and then your company, is huge. And there was a very interesting Eric Brynjolfsson, who is at Stanford and writes a lot of the really good future-looking books on this. He wrote the third Machine Age with Andrew McAfee a number of years ago. But he's written some really interesting things about the economics of these systems. And the basic economics 101 is, if the price of things goes down, people use more of them. Yes. And if you can do things quickly, people do other stuff. And that's just what happens within an economy. Somebody gets more productive, which means they earn more money. What does that money do? It then starts to circulate. Yeah. So if you believe in basic economics, unless we're very unlucky, and with the caveat that there's clearly always the danger of that in between time. And it is a big danger, but when society moves really fast, it will adapt. It will adapt, but sometimes it takes a long time. So we really got to pay a lot of attention to that middle thing. But otherwise, I mean, you know what it's like. You just use these things, and you think, this is just amazing. I can learn so much so quickly, and do so much so quickly. How is that not a good thing?
Yeah. I think most people don't realize. I think they're only scratching the surface. They'll ask some mundane question and it gives you an answer, and it's like, big deal, I can get that from Google. They don't actually press it, like really challenge it. One of the things, though, it's funny, I asked it recently to come up with a thumbnail for a YouTube video I was putting out.
Oh, right, yeah.
And what is really interesting is it can write text perfectly, but if you ask it to produce like a photograph with text in it. It'll
Yeah.
almost always be incorrectly spelled.
Yeah.
And it's like it can't predict how it should look in advance or something like that.
Yeah, it doesn't like that. It's getting better. And there is one application that supposedly is pretty good at it. But no, even on Midjourney. So because I use Midjourney most of the time. No, the text is all over the place. But again, you see, it's understanding. A lot of it is to do with understanding what these things are. And one of the key points I make on my course is to remind people this is not a database. You are not doing a lookup in a database. So if you ask it for all the countries in Africa that begin with F, it's gonna get that wrong. If you ask it what the capital of France is, it'll get Paris. Yes, because that is in its training data probably millions and millions of time. Ask it for the capital city of the 160th biggest country in the world, it'll probably get it wrong because it's not in its training data. So you are not dealing with a database. You're not dealing with necessarily dealing with something factual.
Yeah.
So this is much more stimulating for the people for things when you're, I don't know, you're sitting 4 of you in your room and go, well, what the hell are we going to do with that building? Yeah, let's just see. Well, where does this take us? If the Toyota thing of why the 5 whys, why.
Yes.
Just to do it. It's great on that sort of thing. And the business about the hallucinations, that it does make things up. First, I would say that these things are actually getting better at not making things up. And the more precise you are, the more constraints you give it, the less chance it's got of making things up. But the flip side of that is why it's so damn creative, because it can make things up. So that's why you need to approach it, and it's also why it's one of the reasons why it's going to be hard to become corporate software is because it doesn't really behave like software. Software is 1 + 1 = 2 + 3 = 5.
Yeah.
And you do it once and you do it again and it's the same answer. Whereas with these things, you're not going to get the same answer all the time. Yeah. So you need to rethink, when am I going to use it for what purpose? Because, this is generative AI. There's an awful lot of predictive AI. So, if you want to measure and, analyze your HVAC systems, you use predictive AI. You don't use generative AI. You might use generative AI to then write the report based on the stats that come out of the whatever. Yes. So it's but I think that's one of the things that's so intriguing about this. People are thinking new ways of working and new ways of thinking, and that's what sort of happened back in the the mid-90s. You suddenly had this thing, and so. Just think back to Uber and Airbnb. That we're so blasé about them now, but there was a time where the idea of just having something in your hand and say, "Bring me car," and get out the other end without exchanging money or anything, you think I'll do it. The world doesn't work like that, and this is what's gonna happen. So.
The real power up that I'm looking forward to is generative AI that can take over my email inbox and just talk to me, tell me the priorities, and I can just say, oh yeah, send him a reply, tell him yes, or and just for it to deal with that, because
that allegedly is Microsoft Copilot, isn't it?
Yeah,
but Copilot at the moment, you can only get it with companies. You have to buy 300 licenses. So at the moment, but I don't know. It's going to be a month, 2 months, few months, and then it will come. Copilot allegedly will do that, which is another interesting thing. You see, I'm a very Mac person, so I'm a very anti Microsoft person from years and years ago. But that's such a powerful tool. I might have to go back. I might even have to get Outlook, although it'll turn up in other things. But yes, this whole thing of there was a a lecture given by a chap called Andrej Karpathy. Andrej Karpathy, who's one of the founding engineers at OpenAI, used to work head of AI at Tesla, and is something of an original god, although he's actually quite young. He did a lecture recently about how language models work, but also where they're going. And the too long did not read bit about it is he talked about we're going to get to a natural language computing. So the whole idea of going into your, I don't know, your asset management system, setting up you'd speak to it. Tell me what you want. I want this, I want that. And that's the same thing with your email, isn't it? You want an agent that you can give a mandate to, that if this, then that, and you deal with all that. But I think this business about natural language computing potentially is a huge thing.
Yeah, for sure.
When we can just interact with all our databases, and certainly amongst real estate, what are my leases at risk over the next year? How many properties do I own? Just stuff like that.
Yeah. I tried an exercise recently. We have these leases that we would have drawn up with companies, and it might have a 67-page, PDF, and I fed it into the computer, into ChatGPT. Of course, that's too big; it wouldn't take it, so I had to split it up and things. But yeah. I was trying to get into a situation where I could just say summarize the primary points of the lease. And then I could ask it a question like, when's the expiry date on that? And what do I need to watch out for? But it's not quite there yet. It's I do look forward to that day when you can just tell it, go into my server and look for the information that I need and spit it out and tell me.
This is one of the big areas that I think is going to get productized within the industry, because there are so many instances that are like that within the industry.
Yeah.
But these models need to be fine-tuned, as they call it, specifically for those purposes. And I believe there's companies that are a long way down this route in the legal section, particularly in American legal. But they've been trying to do lease abstraction for years, haven't they? But I feel quite sorry for those companies, really, because they were doing really innovative up to the minute stuff until
it's replaced.
Until something completely different came in. But someone, there's a company on one of my case studies called Fifth Dimension. They do this sort of stuff, and increasingly going to do this sort of stuff. But it's quite a big deal. It's quite a big deal to do it. You basically need to fine tune it, and then you need to put a front end on it. But someone to do it, because it's a big market.
For sure, yeah.
It's a big market. Or you never know. GPT-5 will come out and it'll just do it in its sleep. But
well, that's the next big thing where they talk about. Of course, newspapers love a little bit of controversy or whatever. But after the Sam Altman sort of firing and then rehiring recently,
fiasco, yeah,
they were fiasco, yeah. They were talking about this that they were working on a generative or an artificial general intelligence, and that it frightened the socks out of a number of scientists in there because it was so advanced and stuff like that. And I kind of think to myself that there's a certain amount of like, oh, come on, the newspapers, they love a bit of blood or a bit of gossip or whatever it is.
I put most of that down into Saturday evening pub talk.
Yeah. Yeah,
exactly. There's a monster on the moor. Have you seen it? Personally, I think it's extremely unlikely, and there's much better things to be worried about with AI. There is lots of regulation is needed, and we need to really get a move on in putting some guardrails in certain places, and what do we allow and what don't we allow. But worrying too much about imminent extinction, you can't even get the bloody expiry date on your lease. And as someone said, you can teach a 17-year-old to drive a car in about 40 hours.
Yeah.
You can't try a machine take an awful long. Just can't do it. There's so many things that no.
And sure, they put, like, if you look at the militaries around the world, they'll put a 17-year-old into a $50 million jet. And like you almost can't compete with those, that age group in terms of their reaction time and their ability to kind of use a jet.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. I'm conscious of time, Anthony. I thought, given, you mentioned that, 1 or 2 years from now you can see something, but 5 years not so easy. Give us some of your predictions, the kind of what you do think is likely on the cards in the next 5 years, we'll say.
I think mostly it's more of the same. There's going to be more space is going to become less but better. More space is going to become proto hospitality led, but there'll be more tweaking that you're still at work. You're not on holiday, so it's a different type of hospitality. I think we're going to get better at that. We're going to get a lot better at creating flexible spaces. We're going to get much better at building super efficient spaces. The business about a smart building, of a building that genuinely knows what Gavin needs now,
temperature,
and can provide it for him. So buildings are definitely going to get a lot smarter. They're going to get more sustainable. There's going to be more flexibility. We're going to pay more attention to productivity in the wider sense. I think the real estate industry is going to try and get closer to customers, so that we can really help them tune their spaces, because we understand spaces, they don't understand spaces, but we need to understand how they work. How does this company work? We need to get closer to our customers and make these things much more of a partnership. So there's going to be a huge amount of that. I think there's going to be a whole load of new business models arriving in the next couple of years. I'm sorry to say, because a lot of buildings are going to drop in price to a point where, well, we can start again now, and we'll be doing different things, and we're going to have a lot more mixed use. I think, I do think mixed use in all different types of uses.
Living over the shop kind of.
Yeah, and how can we use a building more like 365 rather than 6 by 250 or whatever it is. I think we're going to make a lot more of that. I think the best cities are going to really double down on what makes them great, and it's going to, as I say, central social district. It's fun, but it makes a lot of sense in a lot of places. There probably will be a disbursement of working spaces closer to where people work. I think there's going to be a big differentiation between, as I say, those companies without baggage, or baggage that can be
repurposed
nicely, and leaning into all these technologies are going to become frighteningly competitive, and they're going to be able to do things that a lot of other. So I do think there's going to be, there's going to be a big difference between those who really lean into this and lean out. And overall, I would say within the industry, one has to concentrate really hard on understanding, who do I want my customer to be? And that's going to be different. Different people have different types of customers they want. And then what on earth do they want? And I really, really understand what my customer wants, and I'm going to give them that. So I think we're going to become much more human. We're going to become a much more human centric industry, and hopefully we become a better builder, new materials and all this sort of stuff. On the other hand, sometimes you read the more investment minded side of the industry, and you think, well, actually, no,
maybe not. Yeah,
maybe not. But I would. I would see, essentially, I see massive potential opportunities given all the technologies that are building up at the moment, and the sort of people that are leading it. It's a different, there's a different type of person, I think, and put them together. But it's a bugger of an industry, isn't it? When it's great, it's great, and when it's bad, it's bloody horrible.
Very true. And tell us, Anthony, the last question is 2030. You mentioned this wall, this cliff. Do you think that people are going to adjust in 6 years, or do you think the politicians will kick the can down the road?
Oh God.
A little bit like what Rishi did recently on this housing.
I really hope they don't. I suspect in some areas they're going to have to, because bringing somewhere up to scratch in the centre of Dublin is different to somewhere in the wilds, and bring somewhere up to the centre of scratch in London is not bring somewhere up to scratch in somewhere else. The numbers just simply won't work. But I'm tempted to say the life experience person will say they'll kick it down the road. It's bound to happen. Lobbyists are getting there, kick it down the road. But the optimist will say, well, that's all very well, but no one's going to want their building.
Yeah.
So you can kick it down the road, but I don't think anyone's going to want. You get to 2030 and you're trying to pretend that you have a building for a top-end customer.
No,
I don't think you've got a chance today, let alone 2030.
Yeah,
so
you
can kick it down the road. I mean, you kick it down the road and hope it all. But the customer doesn't want that. And the regulators will hit. They might kick it down the road, but they use it as an excuse to hit you with a big bill. So I don't know. It's sort of experience tells you that people get around these things. But but if they do, we're really buggered, aren't we? If we don't get to 2030, we're not going to get to 2050. And then I don't know.
I'm watching like forest fires and flooding and all of this, like this increasingly frightening sort of weather extreme events, and the more and more that it's happening, the more obvious it is that this is what's happening.
Well, that is. I mean, I haven't talked about that a lot. This is my sort of other hobby horse, the sort of geopolitics of all of this.
Yeah,
it gets quite. I mean, look at Europe during last summer. Spain 40 degrees, Italy 40 degrees, Greece 40 degrees, and you think, well, I'll go on holiday in Spain, Italy, or Greece, and then you go, well, actually, I'm not going to go. I'm not going to go.
Yeah. Not
and you suddenly get to that sort of situation, and there's lots of dynamics changing. So we got to work it out one way or another.
Well, you and I won't solve it tonight, that's for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Anthony, it's a great pleasure. Is there anywhere you would like listeners to be pointed to? Is it your course or your website or anything like that?
If people would like to know more about my course, about me and my blog, antonyslumbers.com without an H. Or follow me on LinkedIn. Most stuff goes on LinkedIn. Used to be big on Twitter, but a certain person's ruined Twitter, so not there anymore.
Yeah, I know, like myself. All right, Anthony, it's been a real pleasure as always, and look forward to watching and listening and reading more from you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure, Gavin.
All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Anthony. It's, as always, food for thought, all of these things. Definitely, I think artificial intelligence is going to radically change the world that we live in over the next couple of years. Somebody has described it as basically like the invention of electricity, and the difference in the world before electricity compared to after electricity. And that's how they're comparing artificial intelligence. So time will tell, but certainly I would be in that pack of people that believes that, and I'm kind of paying attention to this myself, although it is not clear how to use it yet in real estate. I mean, as they say, time will tell. Guys, I hope you enjoyed this one. I shall see you again next week, and hopefully I'll get on top of things and I won't be recording at 5 a.m. If you're watching the YouTube video, apologies for the view. Take care. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Behind the Facade. If you have any questions or topics you'd like me to cover in future episodes, please connect with me via the Facebook group that is called Behind the Facade Community. Alternatively, you will find me on social media. My handle is Gavin J. Gallagher. You can stay up to date with all of my content and the various projects I'm working on over on my website, gavinjgallagher.com. And while you're there, please do add your name to the Join My Tribe thing over on the right-hand side. This will ensure you're kept up to date via my weekly newsletter. All of these links are in the show notes below. That's all for now. I will see you guys in the next episode.